Welcome to the start of Chapter 2. Before we do Chapter 2's lessons, I wanted to take some time and just give an overview of fractions. So Chapter 2 is on fractions, decimals, and percents. We will get there, but first we're going to do a couple of pages. Actually, it's a little note-heavy video. I wanted to give you an overview of topics that are essential from your past grades so that you can brush up on what fractions are and what you need to do with them. So as you can see, there are 4 pages that we're going to be doing tonight. The first 2 are just going to be a brief overview of what fractions are. We are also going to review adding and subtracting fractions, and very small end of the video dealing with multiplying fractions. So you should have received 3 pages of purple, green, and yellow. And I'll walk you through where to put what. First thing you need is this purple page. You're just going to snip and cut this first box rectangle off, and that is going to go at the very top of page 33. Basically, fractions are dealing with pieces or parts of a whole. So there are 2 vocabulary words that you need to know associated with fractions. First one, numerator. The numerator of a fraction tells how many pieces you have, and you guessed it, denominator of a fraction is the bottom number, tells how many pieces total that you have, or how many pieces the whole is broken up into. So I'm going to put that right over here. The numerator is going to be the n on the top of that fraction bar, and the denominator is on the bottom. Now I want you to look at the rest of that purple page. It looks like this. What I do want you to do is cut right in the middle. You have the title, equivalent fractions. So once you cut this top part out, you are going to have to snip the doors. This is going to be a barn door, kind of foldable, and that will flip up like that, and the other one will also flip up. So what's actually going to happen is the foldable will actually get glued to the bottom 2 rectangles. So these are like the cover sheet of the bottom. It should look like this once you get it glued in. Okay, I know I have something written here, you don't have to worry about that, but you should flip it up once you glue it in, and it should be going right below that fraction one that we just got done filling in. Basically, we're going to do a quick review of what equivalent fractions are. Basically, whatever you do to the top or numerator number, you must also do the same thing to the bottom number or denominator. So we can find equivalent fractions by multiplying and by dividing. And by dividing, we're also calling this simplifying fractions or reducing fractions. Here we go. We're going to open up those barn doors, and these are what should be underneath those 2 covers. So to multiply a fraction by a form of 1 whole is to find an equivalent fraction by multiplying. So say I wanted to find the equivalent fraction of 3/5. I can pick any form of 1 I want. 2 over 2, 3 over 3, 4 over 4. When the numerator and denominator are the same, it's like 4 divided by 4, and that is 1 whole. So you're talking about 4 pieces of pie that make up the entire pie, and we're going to eat all 4 and we've eaten the whole pie, for example. So if I take 3/5 and multiply it by a form of 1, I will get an equivalent fraction that is the same as my original. So let's just multiply this by 3 over 3. And we're going to touch on this at the end, but when you multiply fractions, you multiply numerators together. So 3 times 3, and then you multiply denominators together. And our equivalent fraction would be 9/15. So 9/15 and 3/5 are the same exact fraction. You can also divide fractions to get equivalent fractions, and we're still going to be dividing by a form of 1 whole. So it's still 2 over 2, 3 over 3, 10 over 10, 1,000 over 1,000. How do I know when a fraction is in simplest form? Well, there's a couple of different ways. When the numerator is 1, you know it's in simplest form, you can stop. If the numerator and denominator are consecutive numbers. Now, consecutive numbers mean that the numbers are one right after another when they are in a number line. So 5 and 6 are right next to each other, 7 and 8 are right next to each other, 3 and 4 are right next to each other. So you can see 5, 6, 3/4, same idea. Once you have a fraction that is like that, you know that that fraction is in simplest form. The third condition where you can know that you can't simplify anymore is that if the numerator and denominator do not have any factors in common with each other besides 1. So we wrote 1 a lot on this page, I realize that, but these are the 3 rules to decide whether you're done simplifying or not. What I do want you to do is lift up this door. We're going to do an example actually right on top to show you how to simplify a fraction. We're going to simplify 16 over 80. And we have to think what numbers work well, what factors work well when we're trying to divide these numbers and make them smaller. So if we weren't sure and we wanted to just go with 8, because we recognize that 8 is a common factor of 16 and 80, we would divide by 8 over 8. Same thing applies. We're going to divide across the numerators. So 16 divided by 8 is 2. 80 divided by 8 is 10. But I noticed here that they're both even numbers. So I could have picked a bigger number. That's okay. We can take 2/10 and just simplify again. So 2/10. Because they're both even, I can divide by 2 over 2. 2 divided by 2, 1. 10 divided by 2, 5. We have a 1 in the denominator. That tells us we are good. This fraction is simplified down to 1/5 and we are done, which means 1680 is the same as 1/5. So your notebook paper looks like this. You're going to turn to the next page, and then you're going to cut out the foldable that is green that says improper fraction to mixed number, and then the mixed number to improper fraction. So when you cut this out, this is actually going to be 2 doors. We're going to need this bottom one at the end, so save that. And don't cut this. We're going to fold on this line. This is kind of like the binding of the book. So you can see here I've cut this out. We have to cut the 2 doors and separate. And when you will fold them back, so you'll have that little space where you can attach this little binding part to your notebook page. And what's going to happen for this foldable is you're just going to turn to that next blank page in your notebook, glue this, just the binding part right on there, so that you have notebook paper underneath to, so you have the notebook paper underneath that you can write on to put the notes in. Okay, so get that set. It'll look like this. Okay. What I want to review is the difference between improper fraction and mixed number. So let's start with the big idea first of what an improper fraction is. So if you think of a number line, regular fractions like 3/4, 1/2, 15, 16ths, all exist between 0 and 1. It's not nothing, but it's not one whole. But you can show in fraction form numbers that are bigger than 1. If you're going to the right on the number line, bigger than 1. So right here I have one whole pie, and then I have a piece over here that's bigger than one whole. What improper fractions are is that they split up all 5 pieces, and they are still each 1/4 of the entire pie. So this is a mixed number because it has one whole part and then part of another whole. If we had 3 more pieces, we would have 2 wholes. So improper fractions, and going back to this one, if you have 5/4, then you would have an improper fraction. So now we're going to go on to the notes. So open up that first door. When you have an improper fraction, you'll always have the numerator bigger than the denominator. If you think of my picture, there was 5 orange pieces, and so the 5 would be in the numerator, and the 4 would represent how many pieces would it take to make that one whole pie. So I'm going to actually want you to draw a circle and a little tiny body and give them a smile. I want you to think improper fractions have a big head and little body, just like caricatures. When you go to the fair, you might see those drawings, and they always have a big head and a tiny body. Much the same with improper fractions. The numerator is bigger than the denominator. That's an easy way to remember. So the example is like 22/3. That means the pizza pie could be split up into 3 pieces, but we don't have 3 pieces, we have 22 pieces. So we have more than one whole pizza pie. In order to find out how many pizza pies we have to divide to go into a mixed number. So the numerator goes inside the division. The denominator then will be on the outside. And then we just simply divide. So 3 times 6 is 18. 3 times 7, 21. That works. And we have 1 left over. So, just a little review. The 1 is going to be the numerator, and the 3 is going to be the denominator. So we have 7 whole pizzas and then 1 piece left over. It's always a good idea to make sure you circle that mixed number when you're done, just so that I know you know what the answer is. Now I want to give you a trick from going from mixed number to improper fractions. So go ahead and open that second green door. We're on the bottom part now. When we were going from mixed number to improper fraction, we are going to try the multiply and then add trick. The multiply add trick is just that. We're going to multiply and then we're going to add. So let me show you what I mean. If we have the mixed number 3 and 1/4, I want you to write that really big, okay? So 3 and 1/4. We're going to take the 4 and the 3 and we're going to multiply them. So 3 times 4 is 12. So you can hold 12 in your brain, or you can write it down here. And then we're going to take that answer and we're going to add whatever the numerator is. So we are going to add 1 to 12 and get 13. That number 13 becomes our big numerator of the improper fraction. So 13, and the denominator will always stay the same. That's the only piece they have to remember. Denominators will always stay the same. So let's write that down so we don't forget. Denominators stay the same. this is how we find the new numerator. And we have 13/4 is our improper fraction. There are lots of different ways, which are actually on the bottom of your note sheet. I'll get to those after, but this is a step-by-step formula that if you follow every time, you will arrive at the right answer, minus some careless mistakes if you make them. So I always like to write problems vertically, not horizontally. You might see them horizontally, but I actually rewrite them vertically, one fraction on top of the second fraction. If you have mixed numbers, we're going to want to change them to improper fractions like we just did in our green notes. Then we're going to need to get common denominators. In order to add or subtract, we can't do that unless the denominators are the same. We could find a QCD, a quick common denominator, or we also could find a LCD, a least common denominator. So you might only have to change one fraction if you're doing the least common denominator. I'll show you what I mean. Then we're going to form equivalent fractions, back to our purple notes, and then we're going to only worry about the numerators. Lots of students that I've seen try to add and subtract both the numerators and denominators. We don't do that. We only add the numerators together or subtract the numerators. So a helpful hint is to actually box the numerators, and so we don't forget to do that. Then we add and subtract and bring down the denominator. That stays the same, and simplify if we need to. So let's try an example right underneath this. I'm just going to change my screen out and get ready for that example. And we'll walk through those steps step by step. So here's our example. 5 1/2 minus 2 2/3. And that's going to equal something. But I purposely wrote it horizontally. I want you to too. Because now we're going to actually write it vertically, so you see what that looks like. This is horizontal. Now we're going to write it vertically. So 5 1/2 comes first. That goes on top. The 2 2/3 goes right underneath. We are subtracting. We don't have common denominators and we have mixed numbers. So let's change everything over first to an improper fractions. So we're going to multiply and then add. 2 times 5, 10 plus 1. We have a new numerator, 11. Denominator stays the same. 2 times 3 is 6 plus 2 is 8. Denominator stays the same. Now we have 11 over 2 and 8 over 3. We're still subtracting, but now we need to get a common denominator. We can find any common denominator by multiplying these two numbers together. What's 2 times 3? 6. That's the quick common denominator. Sometimes, if I were just to pretend here and say that this was a 12, it's not, but if it was, we could change just one of them to be 12 by multiplying this guy by 6 over 6. That's the least common denominator. But in this case, the least common denominator is found when we do the quick common denominator, just multiplying them together. So 2 times 3 is 6. 6 is going to be our common denominator. So we're going to do equivalent fractions so that both of these fractions now will have a 6 in the denominator. So what do we multiply 3 by to get 6? 2. That one. And we multiply across. What we do to the denominator, we have to do the same thing to the numerator. 8 times 2 is 16. Up here, we have 2 times something has to equal 6. 2 times 3 equals 6. What we do to the bottom, we do to the top, and we're left with 33. Now we have two fractions, both with 6's in the denominator. Now we're going to pay attention to the numerators only and subtract those. So here's where our subtraction comes. Denominator stays a 6. If you have a hard time subtracting, it might be wise to come over here so that you put those closer together. We will have to trade and get 17. So our answer is an improper fraction. We don't really like to keep them that way, so we're going to divide with a long division to find the mixed number. So 6 times 2 is 12. When we subtract, we get a 5. So putting this back together in mixed number form, this is our whole number, remember? Numerator, denominator, so we have 2 and 5, 6. That's our final answer. It's in simplest form because 5 and 6 are right next to each other on the number line. Remember that vocabulary word? They are consecutive numbers. Good. This was what I was talking about before. It's on the bottom of your yellow sheet. There are other methods to solve besides what we just walked through. You can keep the mixed numbers the same if the denominators are already the same. Be careful when you're subtracting though. That's not one of my favorite things because I see common mistakes with that. You can rewrite the mixed numbers with common denominators. You can borrow from whole numbers so that you can subtract. There are other options. I'm not going to take the time right now to go through them all. But if adding and subtracting fractions were hard for you in 5th grade, it might be a good idea to come at math lab time and practice that more. 235 any day of the week. So the steps that I just went through will work with any number, with any operation, all the time. Last page. Page 36 is going to just be the start of multiplying because we do need to multiply fractions when we're finding equivalent fractions. So this last little piece is just going to get trimmed down and put at the top of page 36. We are going to add to this when we do more on multiplying and dividing fractions in another chapter. So really quick to end, always change any mixed numbers to an improper fraction if you are dealing with them. And to do that, remember from the green notes, multiply add trick to do that. And like I said before, when you're multiplying the numerators across and you're multiplying the denominators across. The third thing that we need to remember is that we don't want to keep it as an improper fraction. So if we need to, we're going to divide in order to get it back into a mixed number. We're going to practice all of this stuff tomorrow in class. I know it was a longer video tonight. Thanks for sticking with me. We had a lot to kind of touch upon, and I'll see you tomorrow.